Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome back once again to the briefing room. My name is Eric Cavanaugh and I will be your moderator for today's event entitled Big Data Analytics, Gleaning Insights with Data Discovery. Folks, we're very pleased to have our very own Robin Bloor as the analyst for the event today, and I particularly love this topic. I think it's one of the most compelling topics, especially as we look at this whole world of big data as well as the traditional world of business intelligence and business analytics. And yes, those are all slightly different things, but of course they're related. So here's a slide about yours truly and enough about me. The mission, as many of you now know with the briefing room, is to really get down to the brass tacks of these technologies and understand what it is that they do such that you can figure out when, where, how, and why to use them. And of course, to understand which technologies may not be appropriate for your particular use case. We cover a different topic every month in the briefing room, and the idea there is we're trying to give our audience some apples-to-apples comparisons whenever possible so that you all can see what is the difference between product A and product B and product C and so forth. So the topic for this month is discovery. It's a very interesting topic because it kind of spans a number of spaces, including data visualization, of course, but also the data preparation that goes on underneath it is required to get you to the point where you can play around with stuff. But what we've seen in the last few years, and frankly, Tableau, who is in the briefing room today, has been doing this since back in 2005, is that the visualization technologies have really matured and have really opened up some opportunities for better understanding how these data sets that you have can mix and match together and allow you to make some sense out of what's going on in your organization. So one of the things that I find most significant about this evolution or revolution of big data that we're hearing about these days is that it doesn't really conform oftentimes to the traditional dimensions that we're dealing with. So in the structured world of business intelligence and data warehousing, we have some fairly well understood and defined dimensions, things like customer, product, profit level, of course, is what you're usually trying to find out in a case like that, costs, what are your expenses. These are dimensions that have been around a long time and are very well understood. In the world of business analytics, you can kind of stray from some of those dimensions a bit to get a look into a particular facet of your organization in whatever your industry may be. And data discovery helps you find some interesting patterns in that data that, quite frankly, you would not have been able to find or probably would not have been able to find without the use of some of these tools. And of course, in the world of big data, now we're stretching the envelope even further. And for those of you who are following the database movement and what's happening in the world of database, which I often call the foundation of information management, well, you know that things are changing. This whole NoSQL revolution, which of course stands for not only SQL, is really changing the way that organizations can persist data. And obviously, one of the things that is worthy of mention is that with a lot of these new database technologies, they have been designed to circumvent some of the old constraints. So we all know about things like eventual consistency these days, or we don't all know, but we're going to find out. And it's really interesting what's happening there because these new technologies are allowing companies to get around some of the old problems that we had to deal with. And the thing is, that requires a shifting of perspective and kind of opening your mind to realize what's possible now, because what's possible is a lot different than what was possible. So today we're going to talk about perspectives and understanding what discovery is all about. And I've taken a look at the slides from both Ellie and from our own Robin Bloor, and there's some very interesting insights that they have woven into them. So here is our analyst, Robin Bloor. He's the chief analyst here at the Bloor Group. Many of you may remember him from Bloor Research, a company he founded in the UK many years ago. But now he's here in the United States, right here in Texas, in fact. So Tableau software, like I said, I've been following since 2005. They have some very powerful tools for letting you mix and match data sets and do so fairly quickly. And they also have a database now that sits underneath their traditional product. So we're going to hear from Ellie Fields here in just one moment, Director of Product Marketing. And Ellie, if you want, I can push your slides for you, or I can actually give you the keys. What would you prefer?
I'll take the keys. That's fine.
All right, so hold on.
Well, go ahead and push it. Might be.
I'm going to pass them to you right now. So just click anywhere on that slide and use your down arrow to move forward.
Okay, great. Great. So yeah, as Eric said, I'm Ellie Fields. I've been with Tableau for a number of years, and very happy to be talking with you all today. It's interesting to hear people talking about data discovery, because to Tableau, it's kind of what we've always done, and the idea of business intelligence or analytics without some aspect of data discovery it really doesn't make a lot of sense to us. So the first thing I'm going to do is jump into what is data discovery. What do we think about when we think about data discovery? And the real distinction that I think comes up is that data discovery, if you want to get into it, is not necessarily pushing your same static dashboard every month, your sales dashboard or your executive dashboard or what have you, with all of the different fields defined and the same views. Hopefully you're discovering something there as well, but really data discovery is this idea of a cycle of analysis. It involves an iteration, a question and answer, almost a conversation with your data in a way. Because, of course, you're trying to discover something in it. There's something new about your data. Another interesting part of it is that it almost has to be self-service. I mean, if you imagine trying to get somebody to write a document for you, it's very hard to communicate and keep the thoughts flowing about what you want to say when you're constantly translating it for someone or explaining it to someone. A lot of this goes on with the consumerization of technology. We've all been trained to kind of go and do for ourselves when it's easier than working with someone else. And we think data and analytics are really falling into that area as well, and that's what data discovery is all about. I have a question. I'm the sales manager or operations manager or development manager at some organization, and I have a question and I should be able to go answer it. That's the heart of data discovery. But in many cases you don't know exactly what that question is, you just know you have a business problem, and that's where this iterative cycle of analysis comes in. There are three things that we often see when we talk about data discovery. One of them is disparate data. I have yet to see the organization that has all of its data in one enterprise data warehouse or in one specific database. The nature of business today is that people have data in all kinds of different places, and if there did come a day when you got all your data into one place, someone would create a spreadsheet and you wouldn't have all your data in one place anymore. That's just kind of the nature of our work today. That doesn't mean that it's not important to try and create a good data architecture. It just means that to be realistic, you should know that data is going to be all over the place, even if that's only 2 or 3 different places. Big-ish data is really important with data discovery. I think, people have always struggled with trying to find what's in their data. When your data becomes millions or hundreds of millions of rows or billions of rows, the idea that you could just throw it on an Excel spreadsheet becomes just not workable at all. So if you really want to understand what the trends and outliers are, you need to do some process of data discovery. And then finally, new data. So new data types. Web analytics is data that everyone works with today, but 15 years ago, nobody worked with web analytics data and web logs. A lot of new sensor data, a lot of data about social media. These are all new forms of data, and it's not as easy to just say, oh, yeah, it's sales data. I need to find out what my revenue is. With different kinds of data, you need to go in there and really understand what the shape of the data is, what it's trying to tell you at all. So this is what I was talking about with disparate data. Many organizations have one or all of these different things. Data warehouses, cubes, some are old, some are new. People are experimenting with Hadoop. There will always be flat files. There will never be a day that those don't exist. And so what we do at Tableau, our philosophy is that we're not going to try and tell you where to put your data. We're not going to try and tell you you have to move it over here or have it in this format. We connect to all kinds of different formats, and in the demo I'll show you a few of those. As I was saying, new data, there's new behaviors. Customers are doing different things. The world is fundamentally changing. So people are changing what they buy online. Maybe you need to go and discover what that is. We're expanding into new markets. We need to go find out which markets we should choose. Or there's new technology. There's new things going on in our market. Our market is shifting. We need to discover what's going on there. And all of these, there's a commonality across all of these questions and all these types of new data, and that is that there's something completely undefined. It's not as easy as saying, what's our website conversion rate? You have to say that there's a change in behavior. It's not just an answer. It's not 6.3%. You need to understand a trend, a behavior, a new development. And in the range of big data, I like to use these examples of Playdom and Yahoo because they have some of the biggest data around. And Playdom is a gaming company, and their data is just massive. And it's this very new type of data that didn't exist. It's online gameplay. Games didn't used to be online, so we didn't have online gameplay. But now they've got games like Farmville, and they need to figure out how to maximize revenue when somebody's planting rutabagas versus onions. These are questions you just never would have thought to ask a few years ago. And they have to do it on millions and billions of rows at a time. Yahoo, the same, is one of the largest websites out there. They serve a lot of ads. Their ads have a lot of different characteristics, and they need to be able to discover trends in their ads that they wouldn't even have known about, things in the creative. Maybe certain colors are driving different behaviors with customers. Maybe certain colors convert better. They need to be able to discover all those trends and discover which trends are not important across huge terabytes of data. So what do you need to be able to do in data discovery? And just so everyone knows, I've only got a few slides here. I'm going to jump into demo in about 2 or 3 more minutes. But the things I'll be showing in the demo, these are what we really think are important to data discovery. The first is you need to be able to figure out what you want to do with your data architecture. Data discovery does not mean re-architecting your data, so we'll look at that. Data blending, and that's the ability to mash up different data sources and taking an iterative approach. So let's look at each of these. First of all, in Tableau, we are an in-memory solution, which means that you can bring data into memory on your local machine and use everything all the way from your high-level caches down to your disk drive to store and work with that memory. But you don't have to. You can connect live to a database. So many customers have invested in very fast infrastructure. They've invested in cubes or Teradata or Vertical or what have you. And if you have invested in those things, that's great. We provide a native optimized connection to many different data sources, and you can go ahead and leverage the infrastructure that you've created. You can leave all your data where you put it and analyze it in Tableau. Or you might be working with Hadoop or a transactional SQL database or another system that's either not fast or you don't want to put load on it and slow it down. And in that case, you can pull a very large subset of your data or all of your data right into memory on your machine. And really what's important here is the idea of choice. With Tableau, you can switch back and forth between live and in-memory. So we're not trying to tell you you can do data discovery, but you have to do it our way. We want to try and fit with what you're already doing. So these are some aspects of the data engine, and you'll see us use it in a minute. But typically what we see people really worrying about with this is, can I keep my data fresh? And you can refresh your data. You can refresh it incrementally, and the solution is very, very easy to use. So we'll go through that in demo. The second thing is the ability to mash up your data. What I have here is a schematic of Tableau's data blending, and it looks harder than it even is in reality. And data blending is simply a way to take 2 different data sets that have common fields and say, I'd like to see these 2 together. And when you think about the way the data lives today in so many different places, this becomes almost a requirement for doing any legitimate analysis, because you're almost never going to find all the answers in one data source. And if you confine yourself to that one data source, you're going to be limiting what you can understand simply because it's easier to work with that data source. So we want to make sure that you can go and ask the questions where the answers are. And then there's this self-service concept with rapid iterations. And instead of going too deeply into that, I'll just go straight into a demo. So Eric, can you give me the ability to share my screen?
Yeah, if you just go top left, click on the Quick Start.
Right.
And then there you go. Yep. And folks, we've got a couple good questions already coming in. Please don't be shy. Send those questions in at any time. We'll do the analyst briefing here in about 5 to 7 or 8 minutes, and then That goes about 15, and then you get your questions answered, so send them in.
Great.
Okay, and I can see your desktop now.
Okay, that's great. So what I'm going to do is a very quick demo on some data that I have here, and this data is simply, in this case, we're just looking at orders, different orders, and it is not a large data set. It's about 8,000 rows, but it's a data set I'm not familiar with, or I've got new data coming in, so I'm going to go ahead and connect to that data. And when you connect the data in Tableau, you can connect to any of these sources natively, or you can always go to an ODBC connection. And so I'm going to go ahead and say I'm going to connect to an Excel sheet, and I'm going to connect to that sheet that we just saw. And this is that one-click data engine here. I could either connect live to this data source, or I could import all the data. And in this case, I'm just going to go ahead and import it all. And it's going to bring it in memory on my machine here and create a small extract database for me right on my laptop. And now I can look at this data, and in that self-service way, in that kind of exploratory and discovery way, I can just start dragging and dropping. So I'm interested in perhaps what are my largest orders. I know that, for example, I might get some large economies of scale if I'm able to deliver more to different customers. So I might want to start looking at order quantity and saying, okay, what's happening with my order quantity? Maybe I want to drill in by quarter. And maybe I want to keep just zooming down and drill in all the way to the day level. And it's hard for me to see a trend in here, but I can see I've got some very large orders. So maybe I want to just drill in a little bit more and see what types of customers are giving me bigger orders. And so I've got my different segments here. With Tableau, you can do a lot of manipulation in just a few clicks. It's extremely easy to use. So one of the things I'm going to do is I'm going to do a quick calculation on this. Maybe I want to see the running total of each of these segments. And over time, I can see that by far and away, restaurants are the biggest segment for me. And then I've got the other segments down here. There's a handy back button because you often go forward into some kind of analysis and you need to step back. And so this kind of iterative questioning and answering is very, very important to data discovery. One thing I might want to do is I might want to look at trend lines here. And again, I'm looking at order size, so I can see that the order size, again, for restaurants is definitely trending up, whereas for bakeries it seems to be trending down. And perhaps I know there's some trend in my customer base where bakeries are becoming more boutique. They're getting smaller. They're not quite as large. And so if I'm looking for these economies of scale and being able to send larger orders to my customers, that might be a problem. I'm going to go ahead and change the colors just to show you that it's possible. A lot of times color does help us do discovery and analysis. In this case, it's mostly cosmetic. You know, the next thing I might want to do is I might want to look by customer and say, okay, which customers are giving me the best orders? And so now I've just double-clicked on customers. I'll go back and show you that again. And it's laid out customers on the canvas. And maybe I want to look at order quantity by customer. You can see it's giving me the total order quantity. I may want to look at an average order quantity, so I'm just going to change the aggregation. Notice how I'm doing no programming here at all. It's a very fluid drag and drop interface here. Maybe I want to drag out sales so I can see how that correlates. And perhaps I want to see the number of orders too. So here each record is an order, so I'm going to look at the number of orders. It might help me to go ahead and get the color out here as well. And so now I'm starting to make some progress here. And one thing that's really helpful in the process of data discovery is to kind of relate two different views. So here I've added both views to a dashboard. And I could even go ahead and use my first view as a filter for my second view. So I'm going to turn that on, and I can go and grab my largest orders, and you'll see them show up on the bottom. So I can see which customers, in fact, are my biggest average order quantity customer. And of course, most of those are in restaurants. As we found, restaurants are really increasing their order size, whereas bakeries are going down and the others are holding somewhat steady. Now I'm going to go create one more type of analysis. And in this case, I'm going to show you the data blending that we talked about. So I'm going to go ahead and look at all my orders by state. And perhaps I want to see that total order on quantity. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and connect to another data source. Again, these are all our data sources. I've just hit Connect to Data, and I'm going to go get another Excel sheet. And this is simply an Excel sheet that shows me what territories I have. So I've listed different states and different territories, and you can see here I'm running InMemory with my orders database, and I'm connected live to an Excel sheet. Now, these two data sources could be any type of thing. One could be a SQL database, the other one could be an extract or Teradata or Vertica, and I could have as many of these open as I want. So I could have a couple spreadsheets, a couple databases, whatever I want. And you can see that Tableau has actually looked at my data and said, well, between these two data sets, I can see that state is actually in common. So now I can drag state out from my territory data set. Actually, let me draw territory out from my data set, and you can see that I've simply been able to color code by region which states are in which territory. It's a very simple example of data blending, but it's a very powerful one. And the next thing I might want to do is go back to my orders sheet, and I might just want to go and say, let me see this data at a little bit lower level of granularity, and I'm going to go ahead and click on zip code. And now it's going to go through my entire data set, and it's going to take me down to the zip code level in each territory. So now this is something that my salespeople might be able to use. So I'm going to go ahead and add that map view over here. And now this is something I can actually give to my salespeople. Let's put a quick filter on maybe for, let's add state into the level of detail here. And then we can actually go and say, you know, which state, if I have a salesperson in a certain state, then how can they go and find which customers have the biggest order quantities? So let me just make that global. And now I'm just clicking through my data, and you can see it changing in all three views. Tennessee didn't show up. You can see it showing up in all three views, where the customers are, what the biggest customers are, and kind of what the trend has been within that state. So here it holds in Colorado that the restaurants are trending up and the other ones are flat to down. So this is a place where you might guide your salespeople to say, hey, go ahead and focus on those restaurant customers. Make sure they're really well taken care of. In Tableau, there's always a lot of things you can do to clean up the data and make it beautiful. In this case, I'll just let the example stand as it is right now and be happy to take any questions on it. But what we've done in this example is something very powerful. In a few minutes, we've connected to a new data set. We've looked at different views of this data, a date chart, bar chart, a map, and we've even blended in additional data from a second data sheet about what territories these places correspond to. And so we're doing a lot of this ad hoc, on-the-fly data discovery live right here in Tableau. The last thing you might want to do when you've done some data discovery is go ahead and publish a workbook. So I'm going to publish this up to Tableau Server. I'll put it in the sales area, and I'll call this Sales Discovery. And now I can get this out to my salespeople in the field very easily. It's simply a browser-based view of the analysis we just did. So they can go in, and as they go into each state or as they're looking to prioritize their customers in their territory, they can go in and simply access this dashboard right in a browser window or on an iPad. And it'll work exactly the same. We're in a browser window right here, and you can send this link out, and as long as they have the credentials to get into the back-end data, in this case it's just an Excel file, so that doesn't exist, but if they have the credentials to hit the data that the view is based on, then they'll be able to get this information right in a browser window. So Eric, that's it for me.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and take back control of the car here. It will stop the presenting, and I'm going to go ahead and grab the slides, and then let's bring in our good friend and chief analyst at the Bloor Group, Robin Bloor. I'm going to pass you the keys, Robin, and you now have control. So just click on that slide anywhere and use the down arrow on your keyboard. There you go.
Okay. All right. Well, kind of looking through the the material that Tableau was presenting, I thought that I would kind of just say a few words about the way that things are changing in the area of BI. This, by the way, the backdrop here is something that a photograph that the Hubble telescope took, and it just looks like an eye looking at the planet Earth. So we're being watched by at least one eye in the sky. In doing the presentation, I kind of looked for a quote, and I thought this was interesting from Marcel Proust. The voyage of discovery is not in seeking new landscapes, but in having new eyes. But it's not entirely appropriate, so I thought, well, in BI, I prefer the idea of we're actually looking both at new landscape, and we're also looking at with new eyes. And I kind of wanted to kind of represent this because this is the backdrop to what's going on, and it's one of the reasons that you're seeing the emergence of products like Tableau. If you look at every single layer of the whole BI space at the back end, we've got a rapid, actually, evolution of hardware. We used to have servers and SMP clusters into which one would be pouring a data warehouse. That moved, I would say a couple of years ago, that started to move into private clouds, and now it's moving into public clouds. And the dynamic there is that there's more power and it's less expensive, and therefore an awful lot more is possible in the area of BI. Take the next layer, we're looking at the back-end software. We used to have RDBMS and data warehouse. We moved to, I mean, this started about 6 or 7 years ago, the emergence of the column stores, which were basically a lot faster in terms of database. And then we've had the emergence of big data. It's not, by the way, that column stores certainly can do big data, but you've also had this emergence of Hadoop and the whole migration towards parallelization in the whole area of big data and the gathering of big data, and from that we get more data. In terms of BI, we had BI reporting and standard things like dashboards, and that kind of sophisticated to where analytics became more than just data mining, and we started to have predictive analytics and business modeling. And we've now moved to really big analytics, and we've now moved also to real-time data streams. So the whole area in whatever dimension you can think of BI software has changed, and that means, of course, more capability. Then if we look at the personal, the individual user, it used to be that BI reports and spreadsheets was pretty much all that you ever got in your hands. That moved to, with the advent of products like Tableau, it moved towards much richer capabilities, more diverse capabilities. And now I would argue that it's moved towards personal analytics. In other words, one doesn't think so much in terms of having teams of people analyzing stuff, but every individual, at least a lot of individuals in key positions within an organization, can get at their data and do whatever analytics are appropriate on that data. And that all adds up to more focus and more capability for the individual person. And then we've gone from PCs to laptops to mobile devices, and this just means greater context, because we've now got the idea of bringing data from wherever we can get it to actually your situation, like right now, which of course could be sitting down with a customer and discussing an order or whatever. And the thing to emphasize here is that we haven't had just one kind of change. We've had sweeping changes right across the board. And that, I think, is something that if you're in the area of BI, it's kind of worth thinking about. The other thing that's happened is that we've seen, and I've kind of mentioned this, but I just thought I'd elaborate on this, the universe of data has increased dramatically. So, you know, you can imagine ourselves, I mean, you know, simply 15, maybe even 10 years ago, all that we had were corporate databases. Grabbing data for those, analyzing the data on those things in various ways, reporting on it, and so forth. Then we had moved to include structured data, unstructured data, and that's kind of widened the universe. And then there was the discovery of what I call the guerrilla systems, where various people throughout organizations had actually been keeping almost personal or small departmental databases of their own, possibly doing nothing more than using Excel. And the existence of that data, a lot of that data turns out to be critical in various business processes. And then moving outside the organization, we have the movement up the supply chain and the movement down the supply chain towards the customer, and of course aggregating information about the customer has been a focus for a long, long time. But up the supply chain, more recent. Then we had the advent of the web, and it discovered that there's a vast amount of useful data out there on the web, not just what our business is doing, but perhaps what competitors are doing, perhaps what trends in the marketplace are, perhaps economic trends, that whole set of data. And then we had the emergence of the social networks, and because the social network is, as far as I can see, pretty much people interacting or even gossiping online, some of that information turns out to be very key to organizations because, you know, bad comments can do brand damage, good comments. Even trends can be stimulated by social networks, so there's a possibility of marketing to social networks. And then we're having right now, and it's only really the beginning, the emergence of embedded systems data, which is really data from anywhere, any kind of sensors in any kind of environment, whether, you know, it's what I've always regarded as what will inevitably happen, is that we will have embedded processors in everything, and we will be able to know about our environment, I don't know, on our desktop or on our iPad or whatever. We will have a much broader knowledge. And you know, in drawing a picture like this, it isn't that when one of these new layers was added, the previous layer didn't keep on expanding. This is an expanding picture. In fact, if I could have done a graphic that was animated, I would have done that. Anyway, that's what I would call the new landscapes. The new landscapes consist of a vastly greater amount of data, which means, of course, a vastly greater possibility of doing mashups between data and relating one piece of data to another that's never previously been related. And the general movement to greater power, both in software and hardware, has created greater capability in order to actually do much more with all of that stuff. So in terms of new eyes, from the data side, and I've put three directions here. From the data side, yes, there's more data, but there's also different data, and there's also different blends of data. So that's a dynamic all of its own. Then down the left-hand side here, yes, we've got better visualization, but we've also got faster analysis, mostly because the power on the desktop, power on individual devices is increasing, and we've also got more current data, so we can do stuff that's more relevant to now. And along the other dynamic I've drawn, well, there's more individual capability. In other words, we don't really need, in the way that we did before, teams of people working in BI. I mean, there are areas where you still do, but it's just like it's become very individual. It's become much more actionable, and a lot of that is because it's become much more contextual. So it isn't a matter of sitting there and doing a little piece of analysis and thinking, well, that was a very pretty picture I just created. The idea is to have a kind of an interactive process where something happens and you go and grab data, you drill down, and then you do something about it. It's the difference between, or it's like, it's the last mile, because that's actually where all of the value is generated. And that, of course, has become more and more contextual. So this creates what I've decided to call new eyes. So finally, you know, what does it all mean? Well, it doesn't mean anything unless it means something in terms of the business. So the impacts really are about business impacts. You know, the BI processes certainly can be more convenient. You can kind of take them with you because everything's mobile now. A lot of things are mobile now, but also you can, because of the increase in speed in which a lot of you can do a lot of these things. You can make them inline processes rather than processes that were happening on the side of the normal business process. You can certainly apply them to new areas. The whole thing is accelerated, and because it's accelerated, things that were previously, and Ellie mentioned this, previously iterative processes actually become fast iterative processes. And because of that, they kind of change their nature. In other words, you wouldn't have thought of doing something right now simply because some issue has arisen within the organization that needs looking at. You would have first try and deal with what is going on, and then you'd try and analyze it later. Well, now you may be in a position with the kind of speeds that we're getting nowadays, especially with in-memory database and very, very powerful PCs, to actually go straight in and do something about it, and maybe that delivers action in the moment. And the final thing is it all leads to unanticipated results, because discovery begets discovery. When you discover something, it often generates another question. It might actually generate answers, and it might lead to action, but it can also generate other questions. You say, well, if that kind of sales spike is happening in that area with those kinds of customers, shouldn't there be something similar happening in some other area? And if not, why not? Let's drill down and find out why it isn't happening on the East Coast, because it's certainly happening on the West Coast, or something like that. Anyway, that's pretty much all I've got to say. What I'd like to do now is try and, simply just ask questions, because I think Tableau's demonstrate a very interesting capability. So the first thing, the first question I want to ask, there's an in-memory database now in Tableau, and I know you can get PCs that are configured with gigabytes of memory coming out of the ears. So the question is really, in terms of Tableau, what's the actual limit here? If I'm interested in looking at, let's say, a couple of million records and maybe matching it to a smaller table, is that something that I can think of in doing in a PC?
Yeah, a couple of million records is no problem. The actual limit will depend on the configuration of your machine and the shape of your data. So does it have 2 columns or 200, and how many of them are numeric or alphanumeric? I've personally done hundreds of millions of rows on my laptop with other things like email running with no problem. So it's completely doable. Another thing that you can do is you can actually run a data extract in memory on the server. So if you have a high-powered server machine and you want to be running in memory on Tableau and letting people connect to it from the desktop, you can do that. And of course, depending on how you power that server up, it can run quite a lot of data in memory. But on your laptop, like I said, is up to hundreds of millions of rows is typically no problem with most of the data sets that we've tried it with.
Right. Okay. Well,
and I've actually seen in the order of billions of rows. I haven't actually done that on my laptop, but I've seen people doing it.
I presume you've got a healthy laptop.
I just have a standard laptop. It's a couple of years old. It's a Dell. I mean, it's our corporate issue. I don't think we do anything. Yeah.
Okay. I've got another question in that area, but I'll kind of first of all, I just wanted to kind of get straight. I've seen Tableau demonstrated 3 or 4 times now, and of course, it demonstrates very well because it has very clear and lovely representations of data, and I know that some of them are unique to Tableau. However, I'm kind of interested in knowing the spread of Tableau's capabilities. So could you just speak to each of these? I know you do standard BI reporting, dashboards, etc. Do you do all of standard BI?
Well, it depends. I mean, every vendor comes out with their list of 500 things that they say every customer needs. We do all of the standard BI that most people we know need. So do you need to get browser-based dashboards up with security and authentication or that work with your Active Directory? Yes, we do that. Do you need to get reports onto mobile devices like an iPad and do that in an author once way so you don't have dashboard proliferation? Yes, we do that. Do you need your BI solution to scale up to hundreds or thousands or hundreds of thousands of users? Yes, we do that. Do you need your BI app to sit securely in your data architecture, access your other data architecture, et cetera? And yes, we do that. So in terms of standard BI and reporting, there are many, many customers that do all of their management reporting in Tableau on published dashboards, and then they either embed those on a SharePoint or send the email links out to people, or put them in their other team site, and that's how they report on figures. So standard reporting, yes, we do. OLAP, which traditionally I think refers to the kind of drill down, drill up, slicing and dicing kind of capabilities, absolutely. Definitely Tableau's strength. You saw me drilling into dates there. Tableau actually recognizes some natural hierarchies like dates. I mean, a month comes after a quarter, comes after a year, et cetera. We also recognize hierarchies in geography. And you can create a custom hierarchy. So if I have a product category in a product, I can just tell Tableau, hey, that's a hierarchy, and Tableau will treat it as such. I can drill down as many levels as I want. And that's also a drag and drop operation. That's not something that you have to go and do a big modeling exercise about and custom programming. There's none of that needed. And then analytics and discovery. I mean, analytics, we have quite a lot of statistical and analytical functions in our package. I would not call Tableau something as advanced analytically as, say, an R. But Tableau seems to work. We have, a fair amount of trend lines, confidence bands, things like that. It works for, I'd say, probably 95% of the market, 90 to 95%. If you're doing really hardcore, high-end statistics, you might want a package like R. Many customers use R for things like that, and then use the output in Tableau because Tableau is a little bit easier to visualize that output. And then discovery, we think Tableau is excellent for discovery, mainly because to discover things, the way that we typically do it as human beings is visually. So, you've got to have that visualization component to be able to discover something unusual to you because, again, with discovery, you don't know what you're looking for until you've seen it. And if you can't see it, you never know it's there.
Yeah, right. I mean, it's clearly a strength of the product. And it's kind of it's difficult, it's difficult to know. But I mean, I think it's been well established over time that you get you can discover things statistically, but seeing things visually is just a completely different dimension for the mind. And I think that the more you're able to visualize data, the more it's likely to lead you to thinking of data as a kind of surface or as a kind of landscape in its own right, and finding out why there's a dip here and a rise there, irrespective of simple motivations like profit and loss. It's just like, why is it the shape? And I think that's it's difficult to talk in terms of what's there and what might not be there. But certainly the fact that you've got strong visual capability kind of recommends itself. Okay, the next question really is about what you need to do at the back. Because the neat thing, obviously, about the powerful PC-based BI is that you hopefully don't have to have an awful lot of interaction with the IT department in order to get the data you want. However, the IT department is bound to have its own data architectures and stuff like that. So what's the process of getting data for Tableau? I mean, is it simple, or is there are there any particular ETL stuff, or does it do it itself? I mean, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question. At its most basic level, it's quite simple. It's a point and click. So the same way I connected to that Excel spreadsheet, I just found it and I clicked into it and I was connected to the data. It's the same for connecting to a database. So I could point Tableau at a SQL server, and as long as I've got authentication credentials to that SQL server, it's going to bring in those rows and columns the same way that it did from Excel. So at its simplest, that's it. Do you need to do anything to prepare the data? Not really. Any data that sits in a structured form, and you saw the list of things that we connect to all the way, Oracle and Sybase and SSAS, and all of the most common data stores out there today. We connect directly to them, and you can either, as I said, bring them in memory or remain connected directly. And Tableau loves that structured data. It even loves, Hadoop is clearly unstructured data. That's its very nature, but we connect to Cloudera's distribution of Hadoop. You need to have Hive, which is a kind of a SQL emulator for Hadoop, sitting on your Hadoop cluster so that you can get your data into that semi-structured form. But it's structured data, so Tableau just connects straight to it. So there's nothing you really need to do to your data. Now, every data is dirty or clean to a certain extent. Some people choose to do some ETL before they get their data into their data warehouse, and that's fine, and we'll consume that cleaner data. If you've got dirty data and you haven't done any kind of cleansing or transformation or what have you, you can do a lot of that right in Tableau. So you can connect to the rows and columns that you've got and then use Tableau's calculations or renaming fields or creating groups or creating hierarchies. You can do all that ad hoc right in Tableau. So a fair number of people use Tableau actually for some kind of ETL, and that's helpful as well.
Well, I didn't know that. Okay, are there any specific technology partnerships that Tableau has that you think are worth mentioning?
Yeah, sure. I mean, most of the many of our data connections fall into that specific technology partnership. I mean, Teradata and Vertica are two big ones for us. Cloudera is falling in that category as well, where we see these vendors as really pushing the envelope in terms of what's possible with big data, with analytical databases, in the case of Cloudera with Hadoop. And so we work with those vendors, and we typically get their stuff working in-house, because when we do a native connection to those, for example, in Teradata, we support a lot of features that are unique to the Teradata database. Not only is that optimized connection a little bit faster to go back and forth to Teradata to get the data, but we support impersonation and other features that are important to Teradata users. And then same with Cloudera and Hadoop. We look at that as more of a technology partnership, so we connect to their distribution of Hadoop, and we like to see them pushing the edge there, and we're working with them. And obviously the benefits for our customers is that they have a long list of technologies that they can connect to in terms of the data storage layer. And some of those technologies are really cutting edge. So it's a breadth of things, but it's also being able to stay very near the frontier, or as near as they want to be.
Okay. I had a very specific question. When I first saw Tableau, and actually there are some other products that are powerful for the desktop, my thought was, at last we'll get rid of Spreadsheet BI. So I want to know whether you think, I mean, it can be your personal opinion as far as I'm concerned, but whether you think Tableau is actually complementary to Spreadsheet BI or makes it completely unnecessary.
The part of Spreadsheet BI where data lives in the spreadsheets, I think that will never go away. Excel is a data store just like any, and it's a quick one. I use it all the time as a place to just throw data down, or pick it up from the web, or copy it from some other place. In terms of spreadsheets as a way to manipulate and understand that data, I personally don't do that at all anymore, and neither do most of the people I know who are Tableau users. And I think the reason that people were doing that in Excel in the first place is because there are all these barriers to getting a report or doing some discovery in your BI system. You need to contact IT. You need to get the time of a developer. Maybe you need to get some authentication or something set up on your machine. With Tableau, it's as easy to do that analysis in Tableau as it is in Excel. Plus, you get the advantage of, you can work with far more data than Excel's million-row limit. You can do some of the drag-and-drop analysis a lot more easily than you could in a chart wizard. I mean, a chart wizard is great if you know a bar chart. You want a bar chart of years versus sales. But as soon as you step away from that level of simplicity and you need to start doing this iterative question and answer, the chart wizard is very, very cumbersome. Changing things, updating dashboards is very cumbersome. So in terms of that analytical processing, in terms of the visualization, I think Tableau is all you need. You don't need Excel to do that. But as I said, as a data store, as a place to put data, either intermediate or long term, I think Excel will live on.
Yeah, I think it would live on even if you declared war on it and
Yeah.
So on and so
Yeah,
forth.
exactly.
People would, you're not taking my Excel except for my cold dead hands.
Right.
Anyway, the next 5 questions are really just, I'd like to talk, because this is kind of the area that I'm most interested in, is what's new that's happening. And this is like, how does the expansion of the data space in Tableau's experience alter, and I'm talking about ambitious users, alter what users are doing with their capability, and how does the speed of iteration alter that? And do you have a community of power users? And what have the early adopters been doing, and what vertical business sectors have been most interested? So I think you can take this all at once, but it's really, I know that Tableau is one of the products that is, in a way, is cutting into new ground. So I'm just kind of interested in what you can report in this area.
Yeah, sure. I love the question, actually, the first one of the how does global data space change, and it does wrap up with all the others. I mean, the most important thing about the change in the global data space is not simply bigger data. I mean, people are talking about big data. It's important. But basically, that standard data can fit into standard reports. I mean, again, what's straining the current systems is not the fact that you have more sales data than you did before. It's the fact that you have new data that you couldn't understand before. It's data from new systems. And then even when you do look at that idea of big data in the same domain, the extra sales data, what's become interesting is the ability to store all that source data without any prior processing. And here I'm looking at systems like Hadoop. So now instead of just boiling up the price and the order quantity from any set of sales data, you can keep all of the original documents from emails and orders, etc., and you can do different analyses on these as time goes on with questions you didn't even have at the time that you were creating the data set. And so there's a lot of different dimensions that this is working, and we see this in some of the early adopters, in fact. I mean, Tableau has customers across the spectrum of industry, from healthcare and finance to government. One area that has always really pulled Tableau as fast as we can go is, as you might expect, the high-tech area. High-tech, e-commerce, anything online, because these are people who are constantly dealing with new sources of data, new types of data, new business problems, changing customer behavior, all of these things that we were talking about. I mean, when you're eBay, sure, it seems like a basic idea to us, but when you're eBay trying to figure out how do we actually grow this business that we've got here that has never existed, in a form like this in the world, you really need to be able to dig through that data when you're doing that online gaming type of analysis, or when you're trying to analyze how do customers buy differently online than in our stores. Those aren't questions with an obvious answer. Again, you're not just going to get to a number like 5%. And so those are really areas that we find very, very interesting. And Robin, you also asked if we have a power user community. We do. We draw power users from again, all the industries that Tableau serves. We have a very nice forums where you can get a lot of different questions answered. We have local user groups that meet up across the country and actually across the world. We have a fantastic customer conference, which is going to be in San Diego in November. And that's a place where customers go sometimes for hands-on training in the more technical things, but also to share stories and understand how other people managed their implementation or how they were able to, get buy-in across the organization. So it's a fantastic event and one that most of our customers really enjoy.
And hey guys, this is Eric. I'm going to chime in here because we have an absolute mountain of questions. So Robin, obviously stand by. Maybe you can comment on some of these. But let me just go ahead and dive right in because I think I've got about 20, and I'll try to group some of these together as we go. So I'm scrolling to the top here, and great questions, folks. Thank you very much. Okay, question number 1, is your in-memory acceleration in near real time? In other words, as soon as the data is written to a transactional database, can I do analytics on it using Tableau?
Yes, you can do analytics as soon as the data is written. Now, you'd probably want a live connection if you want that a split second later, but you can connect live to a database, and then as the data comes in, you're just analyzing the new data every second. You can also, if you want to do it in memory, you can also set your update schedule to do that. So you can set your extract to update anytime from every week to every minute. And I think we update our Salesforce data, for example, about every 10 minutes at Tableau. And so it's quite a fast refresh. So it just depends on what you want to do and how much data you're bringing in memory.
Okay, and another attendee has a really good question, noting, I understand Tableau is an in-memory application running on JVM or local in-memory. Do you support any external in-memory such as SAP HANA?
It's a very good question. We do support some external in-memory. We support PowerPivot now from Microsoft and their in-memory solution, and we have not, I won't come out with a specific date on this, but we are planning to support HANA in the short term.
Okay, good. And let me just keep rolling right on through here. So you kind of talked about the latency. We understand that. And you do have some native tablet capabilities, right, I think for the iPad and the iPhone. Can you talk about that, mobile devices?
Yeah, sure. I mean, mobile is really important to BI. I think it fulfills the promise that BI always had of getting data where you need it. We have a native iPad app. We're coming out with a native Android app. And what that does is it gives you touch-optimized controls and, most importantly, an author once environment. And what I mean by that is if I publish a report to Tableau server, Tableau will just detect if I'm on a mobile device and it'll give me touch controls. And if I'm not, it'll assume that I'm using a mouse. And so as the dashboard author, I don't have to enable any switches. I don't have to tell it, yes, make this one mobile, make that one not mobile. And I don't have to publish multiple dashboards, most importantly. I don't do anything different in the design or publishing process. Tableau just handles that. And that's really, really important to mobile BI in my view.
Sure. Okay. And what about limitations on table size? I know you talked a little bit about that with Robin, but are there any limitations, or have you noticed, is there a sort of inflection point in table size when performance drops off?
No, I mean we work with very large tables. I mean Teradata I mentioned is a partner, and Teradata runs some of the largest databases in the world. GM is a customer of Tableau's. They're running some very large data. eBay I mentioned. So you can work with very, very large tables. Now, obviously, everything's not going to be sub-second response times if you're working with some of the largest tables in the world. So it just depends on working with your data, figuring out what you want to work with in memory, what you want to work with live. But yes, there's no limitation on table size. And it all depends, the performance will all depend on the shape of the data. Okay,
and what about security? Do you embrace the security in other database products or LDAP, or do you have your own security component that's woven into the server? How does that work?
Yes, we actually do both. So we do embrace the security that's in different databases. So at the most basic level, if you can sign into and access a database, then you can sign into it via Tableau, and if you can't, you can't. And that's true with a published report too. So if I publish up my sales report and somebody only has access, in the underlying database to see the data for the East region, they'll only see the data for the East region. So Tableau reports are not a way to get around database security. Then there's also a layer of security within Tableau where I can say, independent of who has what database rights, I can say, this report is only visible, should only be visible to this set of people.
Gotcha. And here's a great question. One of the attendees writes, does Tableau have key patents in data visualization that protect it from Oracle, Microsoft, SAP, IBM, et cetera, simply adding these capabilities to their software stacks?
Yes, in fact, we do. So Tableau is built on a technology that came out of Stanford from our founders, Chris Stolte and Pat Hanrahan, and that technology is patented. Okay, good job. Lots of awesome questions here, folks. Thank you very, very much. So there's another really good one in here I wanted to get to. Oh, here's an interesting question. What do computations on data consist in and through which query language? So the thing that we have patents on is called VizQL, or Visual Query Language. It's what lets you kind of do this very rapid drag and drop and visually query data. That's why it's called VizQL. The queries, when they get to the database layer, get translated into SQL or MDX. Okay, so yeah, excellent. And you can always go down to writing custom SQL if you want to do something very custom in the way that you want to draw your data out. Okay, good. And here's a simple question, but a good one.
Is Tableau ODBC compliant, and does it have a dimensionality limitation? In other words, three-way interactions, four-way, etc.
The last one I'll defer, and I'll have to get back because I'm not sure about that. But we do have an ODBC connector, which means that we do allow you to connect to any ODBC database. We're not compliant because we're not a database ourselves in terms of the data store, but one of the connectors that Tableau offers is ODBC. And so if the data store that you're trying to connect to is not Oracle or Vertica or any of the others that we natively connect to, you can always go ahead and do an ODBC connection.
Okay, good. And moving right along, how many concurrent users in the server-based in-memory data store are you able to support? And then let's see, what is the underlying in-memory data store technology for server-based? And I understand you guys built your database, right? It's proprietary?
Yep. We built the data engine, again, we've got some really good people here. We work with the computer science department at Stanford a lot, and we looked at everything out there and built on it to build our own. But basically our data engine is a proprietary data engine, and the reason why we did that is because it's able to work with BizQL even better that way. So we optimized our data store for our visualization query language, and that's why we're able to make it very fast. It's a column store database, and it's basically an architecture-aware algorithm that reads whatever memory you have available and uses it with the data engine.
Okay, so in terms of concurrent users, I guess it just depends on the size of the data, the number of the users, and also, as you mentioned, the nature of the data, right?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, a lot of it will depend on the workload, but we as I said, we have some customers with many users. We have GM, eBay, Wells Fargo, many big users with hundreds and thousands of users using it at the same time. We have I just spoke to Ray White in Australia, who has 10,000 real estate agents who use Tableau Server on a daily basis.
Wow.
So it depends, again, on exactly what workload and what data you're sending back and forth, but quite high scalability.
Okay, good. Now, here's an excellent question. I was thinking of asking something like this, and one of the attendees put it together perfectly for me. He writes, in the real world, isn't there significant potential for error in the kind of open-ended mixing and matching of disparate data sets and fields as you showed in your demo?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, there's room for error. I mean, I guess I would say, what is error? Is error going down the wrong path for a while? Because you may learn something from that. I mean, I think the two philosophies that you have to balance is, never let anyone make a mistake with your data. The downside is that you've locked it down to the point where you're not able to ask any new questions or be creative. Now, I would take the other philosophy, which says make your data available to your people, obviously with the right security restrictions and so on, and let them explore it and talk about it and have conversations about it. Because if someone goes down the wrong path and other people are also able to be in the data, they'll have a conversation and they'll realize that they're going down the wrong path or they're drawing the wrong conclusions. If you lock down your data and lock it up in a tower and have one answer that's just allowed to trickle out and it's the right answer, you're never going to know if that's not the right answer. You're never going to know all the questions that you weren't able to ask.
Okay, good. Here's another very specific question. Can Tableau do data profiling, pattern analysis, matching, identification, etc., of a questionable content record like one would do with a traditional data profiling tool?
To some extent, we rely on visual analysis for that. I mean, our approach is that with visualization, that's where you're going to detect your patterns. So, in an algorithmic way, no, we don't do that. But we do. Our approach for that is the visual analysis.
Okay, good. And I know you connect to all kinds of different things. One of the attendees asks, do you natively connect to MySQL?
Yes, we do.
Okay, good. And, okay, here's another good question. Is your platform parallelized, performance tied to specialty products such as SGI boxes?
It's not tied to any special products, and we do take advantage of parallel processing. And we do let you cluster machines if you've got the server. And incidentally, we do have a high availability feature as well.
Just a couple more and you're off the hook.
Sure.
Is eBay a customer, one attendee wants to know?
Yes.
Okay, good. And one last question, which is kind of a good sort of tie-in, one of the attendees writes, let me just get it in front of me here. So is Tableau basically sort of a front end that combines all the traditional BI type capabilities, reporting, ad hoc query, all that kind of stuff?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a front end to any back-end database.
Good stuff. Well, folks, excellent questions today. Thank you so much. And Robin, I really liked your perspective as well, new landscapes, looking at things in new ways. And I liked, Ellie, your quote where you said in data discovery, you don't know what you're looking for until you find it, right? So it's like the process, that rapid-fire capacity to ask questions, to mix and match data sets, to see what you get, and just keep iterating back and forth. It seems to me that is really the key to data discovery, right?
Right, I would say so. Well, it's a big part of it. That's what the process is in my experience.
So, okay, folks, I hope we got to all your questions. There are so many of them in here. If we did not, feel free to email yours truly. I will pass them along to our friends at Tableau or to our good friend Robin Bloor. You can see upcoming topics. May is analytics. It's sold out. June is intelligence. It is sold out. July is actually disruptive technologies now. We're kind of playing around with that. Didn't get too many takers on governance, which is kind of interesting. August is analytics again, and it's sold out. So we've got a whole bunch of webcasts coming your way soon, folks. This does conclude our broadcast for today. We will archive this at insideanalysis.com. That's our favorite place to archive stuff. And with that, we're going to bid you farewell. Presenters, if you would, just hang on for a moment, and we'll do a quick debrief. But, hey, folks, thank you again so very much. Take care. Bye-bye.